You've got some recital programs this spring.
Yes.
And what's in that? What do you have cooked up for that?
Well, it's the same program I did at Carnegie Hall last January, a year ago. And it's all French music, and it's 100 years of French song. I don't know if anyone of you made it to that Carnegie Hall concert, but it was 24 songs by 22 different composers. And it ranges from Bizet to Poulenc, sort of semi-chronologically. And you know, it's my French thing. You know, I don't know why I love to sing French music so much, but
the French love you to sing French music too.
That's a good thing.
Yeah, it sure is.
And surprising.
Who help? Do you do all your music research? Who helps you find 22 songs by 20?
My wonderful
24 by 20
recital collaborator is Malcolm Martineau. And he's just a genius programmer. He has a brain like an encyclopedia, and he puts all these. He presents the ideas to me, and then we tweak it a little bit. And I say, well, you know, what about this one? And let's do this instead. But normally, he has just because he plays for everybody. You know, he's the recital partner of so many of the world's greatest singers right now, and so he has all the repertoire in his head. And he's also a great teacher, and he's on faculty, and he does master classes all over the world. So he, I think, knows every vocal song ever written.
It's not fair to call them accompanists. So
I think he's, you know, there's so much more than that.
Yeah. And much of it we don't see watching you. You know, they play the piano, you sing, but you're right. They're just doing so much for you.
He makes it possible.
Yeah.
He makes it possible for me to stand up there. And you know, I've worked with a lot of pianists, and all of the people that I've done recitals with are just fantastic, and I am in awe of their talents, both pianistic and just the way that they support a singer on the stage. But in choosing a recital partner, it's just as important to me whether we can have a conversation across a dinner table, because you spend an awful lot of your time on tour across from each other at a dinner table. And you know, it's the dynamic, the personal dynamic is very, very important for me, because if I feel like somebody doesn't get me as a person, then I fear that they won't get me as a musician either, and so that sort of puts a little hurdle in between us musically. And so, you know, it's all of a piece. It really is.
How much music is sent to you? Do composers send a lot of stuff? What do you get one a day? Do you get
No, I get
one a week?
No. You know, a dozen a year maybe, or less than that, maybe 10 a year.
What do you do with them?
I look at them, and I sometimes have somebody else look at them too, and you know, we decide if it's programmable. The problem for me is that I spend so much of my repertoire is opera, which is not decided by me always. You know, if the Met says we're doing Don Giovanni, would you like to sing Donna Elvira? I don't say, well, you know, there is this other piece that I'd like for you to look at. No, you know, I usually accept the offer. But and then the orchestral repertoire that I do, you know, there's so much great, really, you know, mainstay repertoire that I'm still getting to. But a lot of times I do have an opportunity to program new pieces,
right.
Especially in sort of private recitals.
Well, I was going to say, and that's a great chance to give something to a composer who maybe would deserve some more exposure.
Absolutely.
You have a lot of power that way.
Absolutely, and I run a lot of this music by Malcolm.
Right.
You know, certainly if it's recital type repertoire.
Well, now you mentioned that you don't have as much choice when it comes to opera rolls, but on the other hand, the Met, this Iphigénie was sort of for you.
Well, yeah, and the funny thing is everyone.
Not sort of.
Well, there were other people in the cast, Jeff. Notably that Placido Domingo fellow we talked about earlier. Right. A lot of people ask me, though, you know, how do you account for this rash of Iphigénie performances all over the world? And I said, well, actually, the very immodest answer is that all these places asked me what I wanted to do 5 years ago, and I said, well, you know, there's this opera called Iphigénie. I'd really like to do it. And they all decided to do it at the same time, which is basically what happened. And fortunately, you know, those three houses that I mentioned earlier decided that they wanted to do a co-production, which in these economic times makes it very much more palatable for opera houses to do a new production, because it's a very expensive undertaking. I mean, even this Iphigénie at the Met was a co-production with Seattle Opera, so which is, I think, a first.
And they So even the big houses like the Met need the partnerships to make these things work.
Yeah, well, you know, it sort of makes it easier on everybody, and they had a completely different cast out in Seattle, but the set was designed for the Met stage, and it worked in the Seattle stage as well. I think a couple modifications, but yeah, it works well. It works well with these collaborations.
I'm feeling guilty that we aren't saying very much about the New York Philharmonic, which is sponsoring
I
this
love
evening.
the New York Philharmonic. I'm a big fan, and I was reminded today that it has been something like 11 years since I last sang there.
Well,
It's not that they didn't ask.
yeah, I'm sure. Well, it's
No, there were
scheduling, and the rest of
scheduling
it.
problems. But
Sure.
and then today we were talking that the last time I appeared there was in Les Nuits d'été. I jumped in for somebody who was sick. It was with Sir Colin Davis. I think it was in like 96 or 97. I'm not sure about that. And it happened at the same time that I was singing Dorabella at the Met. So there in Così fan tutte. And so there was one Saturday that I sang Dorabella in the afternoon, and I went across the street and sang Les Nuits d'été that night. And I was singing Così fan tutte with Carol Van Ness. She was singing Fiordiligi. And she knew I had this big, huge day in front of me. So at intermission, she was like giving me some sort of homeopathic pineapple extract for energy. She said, "You're going to need this. You're going to need this. Take this." I was like, "Okay, I'll take it. Give me your tinctures." And then about halfway through the fourth song of Les Nuits d'été that night, I thought, what was I thinking? Why did I think I could do this? But I managed to get through.
I'm sure you did.
It was very exciting.
Sure
It was a big week.
What tinctures do you take? How do you take care of your voice?
I'm a big fan of the Grayther's pastilles, those little things that come in a silver can. They're little glycerin, sugar-free black currant glycerin lozenges. That sounds so specific, doesn't it? But a lot of singers take them. They're just little sweets, basically, but they're not sugary, and they're glycerin, so they make you feel all kind of nice and juicy. And as much as I fly and as much time as I spend on airplanes and as dry as... I spent the whole week of Christmas in Santa Fe. And it's beautiful, but didn't get above 20 degrees, and it's just as dry as a bone out there. And so I had to sing on New Year's Eve then in New Orleans. So on the day before New Year's Eve, I flew from Santa Fe to New Orleans, and I was back in humidity, and it was like a sponge. It was like... My throat felt so much better. But because I spend so much time on airplanes and so much, traveling time, I take Mucinex, that stuff. And it's just... Well, I don't want to get too indelicate, but we singers, our lives are about mucus. So,
there are only a couple of professions that can say that.